Did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
Well, I'm sorry for that, for your sake. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately. But I play with wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I keep science for life.
Yes, sir.
And speaking of the science of life, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
Where are they?
Here, sir.
By the way, Lane, I see from your book that on Thursday, when Lord Shorman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that in a bachelor's establishment the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I have often observed that in married households, the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens! Is marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I have had very little experience of it myself up to the present. I have only been married once. That was the consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and the young person.
I don't know that I'm much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir. It was not a very interesting subject. I never think of it myself.
Very natural, I'm sure. That will do, Lane, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, just give me another cucumber sandwich. Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really. If the lower orders don't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem, as a class, to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
Well, how are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring one anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algy.
Well, I believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
Oh, in the country?
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
And who are the people you amuse?
Oh, neighbors, neighbors.
Got nice neighbors in your part of Shropshire.
Perfectly horrid, never speak to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them. By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Shropshire, yes, of course. Hello. Why are these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who is coming to tea?
Merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolen.
How perfectly delightful.
Yes, that is all very well, but I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why not?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It is almost as bad as the way Gwendolen flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolen. I have come to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you were up on pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
I really don't see anything romantic in proposing. It is very romantic to be in love, but there is nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why, one may be accepted. One usually is, I believe. Then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If ever I get married, I'll certainly try to forget the fact.
I have no doubt about that, dear Algy. The divorce court was specially created for people whose memories are so curiously constituted.
There is no use speculating on that subject. Divorces are made in heaven. Please don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They're all especially for Augusta.
You've been eating them all this time.
That is quite a different matter. She's my aunt. Have some bread and butter. Bread and butter is for Gwendolen. Gwendolen is devoted to bread and butter.
Very good bread and butter it is, too.
Well, my dear fellow, you need not eat it as if you were going to eat it all. You behave as if you are married to her already. You are not married to her already. And I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth did you say that?
In the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it's right.
So that is nonsense.
It isn't. It It is a great truth. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent? What utter nonsense you talk.
My dear fellow, Gwendolen is my first cousin. And before I allow you to marry her, you will have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What do you mean, Algy, by Cecily? I don't know anyone of the name of Cecily as far as I can remember.
Bring me that cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
Do you mean to say that you have had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you would let me know. I've been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. It was very nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
There's no good offering a large reward now that the thing is found.
Well, I think that is rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say. However, it makes little difference, for now that I read the inscription inside, I see that the thing isn't really yours after all.
Of course it is mine. You've seen me with it 100 times. And you have no right whatsoever to read what is written inside. It is a very ungentlemanly thing to read the inside of a private cigarette case.
No, it is absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and shouldn't read. One should read everything. More than half of modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
I'm quite aware of that fact, and I don't propose to discuss modern culture with you. It isn't the sort of thing that one should talk of in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily, and you said you didn't know anyone of that name.
But if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, charming old lady she is too, lives at Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back to me, Algy.
But why does she call herself Little Cecily if she's your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily with her fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. It is surely a matter that an aunt may be allowed to decide for herself. You seem to think that every aunt should be exactly like your aunt. That is absurd. For heaven's sake, Algy, give me back my cigarette case.
But why does your aunt call you her uncle? From Little Cecily with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. Oh, there is no objection, I admit, in an aunt being a small aunt, but why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, to call her own nephew her uncle, I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all, it's Ernest.
It isn't Ernest. It is Jack.
You have always told me it was Ernest. I have introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You answer to the name of Ernest. You look as if your name was Ernest. You are the most earnest-looking person I've ever seen in my life. It is perfectly absurd you're denying your name is Ernest. It's on your cards. Here is one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, the Albany, B4W. I'll keep this as proof that your name is Ernest if ever you attempt to deny it to me, or to Gwendolen, or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Ernest in town, and Jack in the country. And the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for the fact that your small aunt who lives at Tunbridge Wells calls you her dear uncle. Come on, old boy. You'd much better have the thing out at once.
Ouch, you talk exactly as if you were a dentist. It is very vulgar to talk like a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
Well, that is exactly what dentists always do. Now go on, give me the whole thing. I may mention, I have long suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, and I am quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by Bunburyist?
I'll reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression once you are kind enough to inform me why you're Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now, produce your explanation, and pray, make it improbable.
My dear fellow, there is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it is perfectly ordinary. The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy under rather peculiar circumstances, and who left me all the money that I now possess, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as uncle from motives of respect that you couldn't possibly appreciate, lives with me at my place in the country under the tutelage of her admirable governess, Miss Prison.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You're not going to be invited. I may tell you quite candidly that the place is not in Shropshire.
Oh, I suspected that much, my dear fellow. I myself have Bunburied all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, I don't know if you'll be able to understand my real motives. You are hardly serious enough. When one is placed in the position of guardian, one must adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. Indeed, it is one's duty to do so. And as a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much to either one's health or one's happiness carried to excess, in order to get up to town, I have always pretended to have a younger brother of the name of Ernest, who lives in the Albion, and who gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear fellow, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
No, the truth is rarely pure and never simple. A modern life would be very tedious if it were either, and modern literature a complete impossibility.
That wouldn't be at all a bad thing.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Don't try it. Leave that to people who haven't been at a university. They do such a good job of it in the daily papers. No, what you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying you were a Bunburyist. You are one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Ernest in order that you may have an opportunity to go up to town as often as you like. I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury in order that I may have an opportunity to go up down to the country whenever I choose.
That is nonsense.
It isn't. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it were not for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't have the pleasure of dining with you tonight, for I've really been engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't invited you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know. You are absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It's very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people so much as not receiving invitations.
Well, I can't dine at the Savoy. I owe them about £700. They're always reading judgments and the like against me. They bother my life out.
Why on earth don't you pay them? You've got heaps of money.
Yes, but Ernest has it, and I've got to keep up Ernest's reputation. Ernest is the sort of chap who never pays a bill. He gets rigid about once a week.
Well, let us dine at Willis's then.
You'd much better dine with Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I already dine there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, every time I do dine there, I am always treated as a member of the family and sent up either with no woman at all or 2. In the third place, I know perfectly well who she will place me next to tonight. She will place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. That is not very pleasant. Indeed, it is not even decent. And that sort of thing is enormously on the increase. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. Oh, it looks so bad. It is simply washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know you to be a Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunbury. I want to tell you the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If I marry Gwendolyn, and she's the only girl I ever saw in my life that I would marry, I'm going to kill my brother. I think I may kill him in any case. Cecily's become a little too much interested in him. She's always asking me to forgive him and that sort of thing. It's rather a bore. No, I'm going to get rid of my brother. And I strongly suggest you do the same with with your invalid friend with the ridiculous name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. And if ever you get married, which seems to me extremely problematic, you will be glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolyn, I most certainly would not want to know Mr. Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You seem to forget, in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none.
Oh, that is the theory that the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
Yes, and that the happy English home is proved in half the time.
Don't try to be cynical. It is perfectly easy to be cynical.
My dear fellow, it isn't easy to be anything nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition about. Oh, that is Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or creditors ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I get her out of the way for 10 minutes in order that you may have an opportunity for proposing to Gwendolyn. May I dine with you tonight at Willis's?
Oh, I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. It is so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Dear me, you are smart.
I am always smart. Am I not, Mr. Worthing?
You are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Perfect. I hope I am not that. It leave no room for development, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we're a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. And now, I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Won't you come sit here, Gwendolyn?
Thanks, Mamma. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens! Lane! Why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I had them ordered specially!
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers!
No, sir. Not even for ready money.
That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I am greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers. Not even for ready money.
It's quite all right, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
Yes, I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed its color. From what cause, of course, I cannot say. Thank you. I've quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. She's such a nice woman and so attentive to her husband. It's delightful to watch them.
Yes, I'm afraid I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all, Aunt Augusta.
I should hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he's accustomed to that.
It is a great bore, and I need hardly say a terrible disappointment to me. But the fact is, I've had a telegram to say that my poor friend Bunbury is very ill again. They seem to think I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, that I think it is high time that this Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he's going to live or to die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd. Nor in any way do I approve of the modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty in life. I'm always telling that to your poor dear uncle. But he never seems to take much notice as far as any improvement in his ailment goes. Well, Algernon, of course, if you were obliged to be beside the bedside of Mr. Bunbury, I have nothing more to say. But I would be much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury from me to be kind enough not to have a relapse on Saturday. For I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one requires something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season when everyone has practically said whatever they were going to say, which in most cases is probably not much.
I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he's still conscious, and I think I can promise you he'll be all right by Saturday. Of course, the music is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, people don't listen, and if one plays bad music, people don't talk. But I'll run over the program I've drawn out if you'll kindly come into the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. It is quite thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful, after a few explanations, of course. French songs I could not possibly allow. People always seem to think that they are improper and either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. What
a charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain they mean something else. And that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought you did. In fact, I am never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Brackmore's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back into a room suddenly that I have often had to speak with her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I first met you, I have admired you more than any other girl I ever met. Since I first met you.
I am quite well aware of the fact. But I have often wished that, in public at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you have always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. Really, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals, the fact is constantly mentioned in the more expensive London magazines and has now reached the provincial pulpits, I am told. My idea has always been to love someone in the name of Ernest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon told me he had a friend named Ernest, I knew I was destined to love you. The name, fortunately for my peace of mind, is, as far as my own experience goes, extremely rare.
Gwendolyn, you really love me.
Passionately.
Oh, my darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Ernest.
But you don't mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest.
But your name is Ernest.
Well, yes, I know, but supposing it was something else. Do you mean to say that you couldn't love me then?
Well, that is clearly a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, holds very little reference at all to the actual facts of life as we know them.
Oh, personally, darling, to speak quite candidly, I don't much care about the name of Ernest. I don't think it suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, I must say, I think there are lots of other much nicer names. I think Jack, for instance.
Jack! No! There is very little music at all in the name Jack. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, have been more than usually played. Besides, Jack's notorious domesticity for John. And I pity any woman married to a man called John. She would probably have a very tedious life with him. To never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. No, the only really safe name is Ernest.
Gwendolyn, I must get christened at once. We must get married at once. There is no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing.
Well, surely. You know that I love you, and you led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you are not entirely indifferent to me.
I adore you, but you have not proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I would consider it an admirable opportunity. And, to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair to tell you, quite frankly beforehand, that I am fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolyn.
Yes, Ernest, what have you got to say to me?
Well, you know what I have to say to you.
Ernest, you don't say it.
Gwendolyn. Will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long you've been about it. I'm afraid you have had very little experience in how to propose.
Why, Ellen, I have never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. Ernest, what wonderfully brown eyes you have. They are quite brown. I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing! Rise, sir, from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing is not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I am engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Pardon me, you are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone,
Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men, although I have the same list as the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I am quite ready to enter your name should your answers be what a truly affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I smoke.
I am glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I have always been of the opinion that a man who desires to get married should know either everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I am pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate, exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England, at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove a serious danger to the upper classes, and probably lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or in investments?
In investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. But between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted from one after one's death, land has ceased to be either a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That is all that can be said about land.
I have a country house, of course, with some land attached to it. About 1,500 acres, I believe. But I don't depend on it for my real income. In fact, as far as I can make out, the only people who make anything out of it are the poachers.
A country house? How many bedrooms? Well, that is a point that can be cleared up afterwards. You have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature like Gwendolyn could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
I own a house in Belgrave Square, but it is let by the year to Lady Bloxham. I can get it back whenever I like, of course, at 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham? I don't know her.
She knows about very little. She's a lady considerably advanced in years.
Nowadays that is no guarantee of respectability and character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something. However, that could easily be altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the style?
Both, if necessary, I presume. What are your politics?
I'm afraid I have none, really. I'm a liberal unionist.
Oh,